Hello, everybody. This is episode 299, and my guest today is Kelly Tuttle, a neurology nurse practitioner who is living with an acquired brain injury that occurred not as a result of stroke, but rather from a traumatic brain injury, also referred to as a TBI, which was caused in a rather dramatic automobile collision. Her story and the challenges she is working to overcome bear remarkable resemblance to that of a stroke survivor, with some distinct differences in the way her diagnosis came to be, but a lot of similarities in how daily life has been impacted by the injury. Kelly recently published her book, After the Crash, which is a guide for those navigating the challenging journey of recovery after a traumatic brain injury. Kelly Tuttle, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to your listeners today.
Thank you for being here. You're not a stroke survivor, and that's okay because we don't necessarily want everyone to be a stroke survivor who joins us on the podcast, but you are a TBI survivor. You had a traumatic brain injury at some point in your life. Can you give us a little bit of an understanding of how that came about?
So I was driving home from work down a rural road, and a driver pulled out in front of me at the last minute, and I ended up T-boning them and being in a big car accident. And thought I would shake off the car accident and get back into life. And as time went by, I found that was not the case.
So, in the collision, how many people were in your car and how many people were in the other car?
Fortunately, no one was with me. And I think there was only one person in the other car.
Mm-hmm. And if you T-boned them, did you T-bone them on the driver's side or the passenger side?
I hit the driver's side of the other car. I think the driver's side, or yeah.
And then what happens then? Does all the emergency services turn up? What's the scene like after that?
It was pretty terrible. Yeah, there was glass everywhere. My car ended up being totaled. My engine was smoking. Uh, People came out from the homes that were along that street. Traffic was stopped, and then uh, I did say an ambulance came out, and then the police officers, of course, investigate the car crash. And since my car was not drivable, it was towed away, and I was taken with the police officers to kind of a local cafe to hang out and wait for my husband to pick me up because I was about over an hour away from home at the time, and so they couldn't just leave me on the side of the road to wait to get picked up. And I was offered to be taken to by ambulance, but because of my nursing background, I did spend some time in the emergency room as a nurse. I just didn't want to go by ambulance. Told them no, which, in hindsight, was probably not too smart, but uh, 2020,
Is that
2020
because
vision, right?
is that because you thought I'm not unwell enough, or somebody else is probably going to need that ambulance that's in more serious harm than me?
No, it was more of I know what happens to people in car accidents. They usually get placed on a C-spine board and a C-collar, which is extremely stiff, so you can't move your head. And then you're left on that board in the emergency room until a doctor can come and see you, and they do a CT scan of your neck to make sure you don't have a cervical fracture, and then you get released and examined for other injuries. And I didn't want to do that. It's terrible to say. No one do what I did. Please do not listen to what I just said.
I'm going to pick this scab a little further now, Kelly. So You're a nurse. How many years in nursing at that
Um,
stage?
I, at that stage, close to 30, 27 years, something like that.
And if you turned up on the scene and there was another two people on that scene that were involved in that collision and you were just a passerby, you would have said, I'm a nurse. Everyone, don't do anything. Don't move. Lay flat. Do this, do that. You would have taken control of the situation. You would have made sure don't move your neck. You would have said all these things. You would have checked out everything. But somehow that doesn't apply to you because you, and don't get me wrong, like I see this across all the people who I interview. They're stroke survivors. They might have a whole bunch of different backgrounds, but they can never, they never wake up in the morning thinking, I'm going to have a stroke today. So therefore, I'm going to do all the right things. They always think it's not going to happen to me. So you know that the procedure to protect the neck to make sure there's no fractures is to potentially save a life, make sure that a disability doesn't happen, make sure that the person doesn't end up not walking or not being able to participate in life, etc. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they do it. Did you feel like it wasn't going to that? Did you feel well enough and you made a decision based on how you felt that no, none of those things are necessary? I'm okay.
Well, it's not like I had clear thinking. Um, your adrenaline's going,
Mm-hmm.
you're working off adrenaline. I'm not sure to this day if I had lost consciousness. Obviously, in hindsight, I had a brain injury.
Mm,
Um, and all I went into was a thinking, not that it was good thinking. I'm not saying that.
yeah, I know.
Was I'm gonna shake this off. I'm fine. I'm gonna go to work the next day. I can't take time off. I was training for my third degree black belt in karate and my training for a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I had a lot on my plate. I did not have time to sit and relax. But I also don't think that my thinking was clearer. And I'd like to emphasize that. So if a caregiver or friend sees this happen to a friend, you really should keep a close eye on them because they may not be thinking right, their brain's not working right. It's had an injury. So they're not going to be making good decisions. In fact, myself, I lost my self awareness. So I wasn't aware of my limitations. I kept trying to push myself. I ended up falling asleep at the wheel down the road because I was suffering from neuro fatigue, which stroke survivors are very aware of.
Yeah, down the
And
road, you're talking about months later.
yeah, I think yeah, it was like 2 or 3 months later, around that
Yeah,
period, that I had fallen asleep at the wheel. Yeah.
yeah. We'll talk about that as well then. So, and you're tough as nails. You're Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're third Dan black belt martial artist. Um, you're, you're an alpha personality. I mean, nothing is getting in the way of you shaking this off and walking away and going back to business as normal. It completely makes sense to me. And I get these stories, almost exactly identical story for somebody who's had a stroke. I'm going to shake it off. I've got work to do. I've got appointments to get to. I've got stuff to do. Everyone's got stuff to do. Everyone's busy and they can't possibly comprehend that this thing is something that they need to attend to. The numb leg or the dizziness or the sinking feeling in the gut or these strange things that they've never experienced before. They don't have a reference structure to be able to go, hey, this is familiar to me. I know what this is. Um, I'm going to do something about it. And you might be a nurse and you see the other end of it. You see people turn up to hospital, but you've never been the person who's getting, who's becoming the patient. You're never seeing that part of the process. You're just seeing the person on the other end of that process. So you're making the wrong decisions in hindsight, but the right decisions in your mind at the moment. How do you think you sustained the actual brain injury? Did the airbags go off? Do you know, did you hit your head anywhere?
Yes, the airbags went off. I actually had bruising on my forehead, so I knew my doctor could tell there had obviously been an impact. And so, when I looked back and was researching brain injuries and how to recover, um, I realized I had uh, the acceleration deceleration type injury where the brain, when you're suddenly stopped, will slam against the front part of your skull and then bounce to the back and then maybe a couple more times. But in my car accident, I had not only T-boned the person, but my car twisted. And I think I got a little bit of that uh, torsion type injury too, along with that. Um, and so that, as you know, can cause mayhem in the brain. Um, uh, there, I did eventually down the road, I had a specialized MRI and it did account for um, diffused axon damage. And that's when the little connections between the brain cells and neurons are severed. And so that did show up. And I just think kind of, you know, that's what you would find um, on that type of injury. So people should be really aware of if they have a fall. Anything that's sudden, sudden stop, from an acceleration to a deceleration quickly. And then any fall that there's some twisting going on is going to make recovery a little bit tougher.
Axon damage, is that localized or is it spread over a large area? Are you able to sort of know to what extent that damage has occurred?
Not not me. I don't know how to read MRIs. It was just read on the MRI report. But I imagine it is a generalized injury, as opposed to like an ischemic stroke where it's more localized.
Okay. So it could be a lot more of the brain impacted than what might happen in a bang to the head that's just directed to one location. So for example, if you just hit your head on a window on a car windscreen, uh, in a slower collision, in a collision that wasn't so dramatic, you might have just had localized damage. But in this case, you've not only hit your head forward, your brain may have hit on the inside at the front of the skull, but also at the back of the skull. And then the twisting also then created an additional layer of kind of challenge of damage to the brain. So when you finally realized that things weren't right, was that soon after your husband picked you up? How did you finally realize that this collision, I'm not shaking it off, it hasn't been what I thought? I'm not going to just walk away from this.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com. where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
It was the biggest thing that was a trigger was I went out to lunch with one of my nurse practitioner colleagues who was working in neurology, and she was curious about my recovery, and thank goodness. And she asked me how I was doing, and I mentioned that I had fallen asleep at the wheel. And she was like, "What? You fell asleep at the wheel?" And I was like, "Yeah, I fell asleep at the wheel. So now I have to take a nap, halfway in between work and home." And who thinks that's okay? Well, first of all, who thinks it's okay to slightly close your eyes and put your head back while you're driving? I did that. It's you just you just don't think clearly, you
Mm-mm.
know. And so fortunately, she said that's not okay. She was very nice about it. She's very nice about it, but she's basically like, that's not okay. You need to get a head CT. I still hadn't had any head imaging at this time. You need to see a neurologist, and you need to see a physical medicine and rehab doctor. And she said PMR. I was like, what's PMR? And she's like, oh, it's physical medicine and rehab doctor. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it so turns out, I went to school and learned they were physiatrists, and now they're known as physical medicine and rehab doctors. And as you know, they specialize in injuries to the central nervous system, including the brain and the spine. So they're the person you want to see after a head injury or a stroke, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
rather than a neurologist. A lot of people think, oh, I should see a neurologist. Well, I'm a neurology nurse practitioner, and what I learned is that they actually take care of people with brain diseases like Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis,
Ah.
epilepsy. So they're not going to be too much help for someone with a brain injury or a stroke, because stroke is also like seriously the foundation of recovering and preventing a second stroke is lifestyle, right? You got to have the exercise, got to eat well, you got to have your numbers looking good. If you
Mm.
have diabetes, that needs to be controlled. If you have hypertension, that needs to be controlled. Your cholesterol has to look good, and that's a lot of lifestyle stuff. And your primary care doctor, your regular physician's very good at helping you with that.
Okay. This is a really important thing that you've just said, because I have so many conversations with people who saw their neurologist and are just perpetually frustrated with the fact that they don't do anything,
Yeah.
and they're continuously complaining about the fact that I went to the neurologist and the neurologist was useless. And it's like, that can't be useless. The neurologists, they know a lot of things about brains, but what they are struggling to do is guide somebody in the path towards recovery. Like, what should I do? How should I do it? Etc. That's the thing that they struggle with. And stroke survivors go there looking for answers, thinking that this person will advise them on what might have caused the stroke. If it was an ischemic stroke that doesn't seem to have a cause, for example, where the damage is, what they can do to rehabilitate it. Uh, there's no information like that. The neurologist doesn't seem to be able to do that. We've got through now almost, this is probably 298 episode, and I still haven't been able to help people with what to do next if your neurologist can't help you. So just so we can emphasize it, stroke survivors should be seeking out the assistance of a physical, what was it?
Medicine, rehabilitative, rehabilitative doctor. PMR is usually what you may hear their title being. And they are really good stepping stones to getting you to the right care. Now, a there's different strokes, as you are well aware, Bill. There's people who are able to get discharged, who are discharged to rehab facilities because they need intensive care, which I always recommend. If your discharging doctor is saying you should go to a rehab facility, you should go to a rehab facility because the physical therapy, the occupational therapy, the speech therapy is so intense. It's really gonna make a difference in your recovery. But if you're one of those people who has a small stroke, um, then you will get discharged home. And, if you have a stroke that doesn't affect a side of your body, maybe it just affected your speech for a little bit, and now you're having maybe some cognitive issues with like problem solving or speaking, then outpatiently, you should also see those specialists, like the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, if you do have some mild issues like some hand weakness or some leg weakness. Your physical therapist is going to help you with that. If you have balance issues, your neurotherapist is going to help you with that. They're really amazing also. Um, and um, don't miss out on those therapies.
Mhm.
They're so important and they're so specific to what's going on with your brain. And they're wonderful professionals that have amazing input to provide you and your family.
Yeah, they're lovely bits of advice there. We'll make sure that people are able to go to the show notes and get the lowdown on that and find out if they have somebody near their area. They'll be able to look for the names, the titles of those people, and then see whether or not they can uh, go there, go to their local Google and search for those types of services if that's what they need. So your your husband has come to pick you up. We haven't got to the stage where you've finally gone home. A couple months later, a little while later, your amazing colleague says something's not right. But in that time between the collision and your colleague going, hang on a sec, this is not right, did you go back to life as normal? Was life okay? Was there some signs in hindsight that things were not right other than the fatigue?
Yes, so I went to work the next day and one of my friends drove me. And when I got to a meeting, I was meeting with a large group of nurses. They all were noticing that I wasn't acting right or speaking correctly. And in fact, we were going to go take a break. And so I said, hey, let's go out and get some Star Trek. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, let's go get some Star Trek. I mean, Starbucks. And they, we laughed it off, but I did get you will see your doctor tomorrow uh, speech. And I did. And my doctor diagnosed me with a concussion and took me off work for 2 weeks. And I thought, I got this, the feeling that I was supposed to be better in 2 weeks and I can go back to life. Because remember, I was biting at the bit to keep training
Mm.
for my black belt test.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I went back to training, working, um, anything, that I had on my plate at the time, I was still trying to address. And I found that I had difficulty doing katas that I had been doing over and over again for 13 years prior. And I'd tell my foot to move forward, it would step back. I used to train for hours, and I couldn't even do a kata for 2 minutes without being short of breath and having a massive headache. My husband was helping me train. He'd call out a kata and the name of the kata, and I was to immediately do it. I wasn't, remembering the moves or what to do, or I was mixing up the names of things I'd been doing for over, 10 years.
We'll be back with my guest in a minute. But first, let me tell you about my new book called The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. When you move past the triggering title, you can read a book which is about the 10 tools for recovery and personal transformation after a stroke. It tells the story of 10 stroke survivors and the steps they took that got them to the stage in their recovery where, from a personal growth perspective, stroke transformed into one of those life experiences that, on reflection, was filled with many opportunities for growth and personal transformation. In the book, there are chapters on nutrition, sleep, exercise, how to deal with the emotional side of stroke, tips and tools for mental well-being, and much, much more. To find out more, go to recoveryafterstroke.com/book. To grab a copy, just type my name, Bill Gassiamis, into the Amazon.com search bar.
So those were some signs. I also had difficulty with my memory. I would review one of my patient's charts in my office, and then go to see my patient. By the time I saw my patient, I forgot everything I reviewed. And so I was having to take notes and carry the paper with me to the room to remember what I had just read. So there was that memory issue. I also started wearing headphones because the conversations outside my office that I normally was able to filter out, I couldn't handle anymore. And so
Mhm.
I started wearing the headphones just to kind of block that so I could concentrate. Um, let's see, I did have I had light sensitivity, and I had dizziness and nausea whenever I would work on a computer or scroll up and down on my phone. And I couldn't watch the TV. It was too bright, it was too loud, and things moved too fast on it. So
Wow.
those were a few of the things that happened in the beginning. And then I ended up failing my third degree black belt, of course. I shouldn't be doing that. And I was really upset about it. And my normal personality would be I'd be upset for a couple weeks, and I'd say, I'm going to pick myself up, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to even do it better. But I was so emotionally upset about it like 6 weeks later. That is so not me. And so had a lot of emotional issues and irritability and anger and stuff. And when you look back, well, those are symptoms of a brain injury.
Everyone listening here is just relating with you. Everyone's just holding their heart going, oh my God, Kelly, we know what you went through. We totally get it. What's your self-talk like? Because, you're 2 weeks at home, I'm going to be better. Then I go to work and then things are not good. Then I can't get my next Dan level kind of over the line. I can't do all these things. Like, what are you saying to yourself other than being emotionally upset 6 weeks after you've failed your black belt third Dan? What are you saying to yourself? Are you looking at yourself in the mirror and going, "What's wrong with you?" Or how do you go about life when everything is so flipped upside down and you're not recognizing this version of you?
Well, first of all, I didn't have that self-awareness. So I didn't even have the ability to go, this is not me. That
Right.
took a long time to come back. And it was one day I tried to go back to the dojo to train, and I was left really upset, just you know, just demoralized. And um, I went home and I was like, huh, this is not me. Something's wrong. And I went back and I read all the paperwork that I'd had from the concussion and stuff that I looked up to help get better. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm getting worse, not better.
Mm.
And so then I sat down with my husband and I said, yeah, I think I'm not better yet. And he goes, yeah, you're not. Your brain's not right. And
Thanks.
I was like, "What? Why didn't you say something to me this whole time?" And he goes, well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Hilarious.
What a legend.
Yes, yes. And so that's when I, started to that, and then shortly after that, I had talked to my colleague who said, hey, you need to get seen by specialists, get the head scans and so forth. But it was
Your husband was afraid you were going to put him in a headlock or something.
probably.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to let you continue the conversation, your story in a minute, but your sensei is probably going, who is this person? What's going on with her? Why is she no good all of a sudden? She was my perfect student. She's done everything. She's a lethal weapon. And now she's not thinking straight. She's not able to achieve anything. Was your sensei giving you any feedback? Were the people in the dojo giving you any feedback?
I don't, you know what? I have thought about that, and I thought, they had some students that were training along with me, and they had injuries, broken foot, and so forth. And they modified their tests for them, and they were able to pass their tests after the modified test and accommodations for their injuries. But they didn't do that for me. And now looking back, knowing what I know, I realize it's because my injury was invisible and that they were not knowledgeable about concussions and brain injuries and how they can affect their students. Um, so that is definitely a knowledge gap that is out there. And I realized after the fact that they just didn't know. They had no idea. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't have any
Yeah.
idea. So I was having a hard time explaining. I just kept saying, oh, my neck hurts. I have a headache,
I've
you
had a couple
know?
of guys on the podcast who are BJJ practitioners, and they both had a stroke because of because of a carotid artery or
Like a dissection.
because of dissection, because of a choke. And
Yeah.
that particular injury seems to be common in the sport. However, people within the dojo don't understand what choking somebody could do to the neck or to the blood vessels today or down the track, a few days down the track. There's no awareness whatsoever. It's a big issue. So that's why I asked. I was just curious. And I didn't expect you to say that, oh, yeah, of course, they were completely aware of what had happened and they were onto it and all that kind of stuff. They couldn't possibly be. They're not medically trained at all. And they don't understand what it looks like to have an invisible neurological condition unless they've had one and unless they've spent so much time like you and me writing books about it and being on podcasts and interviewing people and all that type of thing. Um, so we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll say, look, that makes sense that they didn't respond. Your husband also is in the same situation. He's just going along life as per normal. He thinks you're a little bit off, doesn't want to really say anything because he's not certain, doesn't want to upset you. But eventually he says something, And then how does the next part of the conversation go? What happens after he says, I didn't want to hurt your feelings?
I'm like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, well, I kind of tried. And he did. He did. He said, hey,
Uh,
yeah, I don't think you should continue training. I think you should take a break. I don't think you should go and do your testing. But I didn't hear it because I was just like, I want to meet this goal. I'm in the best condition, fighting strength that am at, because I've been training. I was, I trained 13 years, but I trained intensely the year before. Um, and I didn't want to give that up. And but he did try. And then the other thing was that I was having to sleep a lot. And I was sleeping like 12 to 14 hours a day and taking 2-hour naps, on the weekend. And then I go to work, come home, go to sleep, and then wake up and go to work the next day and do it all over again. And so what happened was all the childcare and the household stuff fell on him all of a sudden. And he actually, was very overwhelmed. He's just like, where's my partner? You know? And who took her away and replaced her with this person who's not so nice to get along with.
mm-hmm.
So he's also not thinking clearly because he's just trying to be there for the kids and stay on top of the dinners and the laundry and all that stuff too. So it was a really rough couple of years, the first two
Yeah.
years after my brain injury. Yeah.
Yeah. Did your husband at the time notice that it was all this stuff started after the collision? Was that dot kind of realized? Was it, she's not been the same since that collision? Did that happen at some stage? Or was that an aha moment later on?
I think he noticed it right away.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was the one with the brain that was working.
Yeah. 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 I know. I know what you mean. Like, it's so relatable, all the stuff that you say, because no matter, because stroke survivors all have their own version of a TBI, and we're all sensitive to light. We're all sensitive to sound. I was out at the most amazing place in Melbourne yesterday with my wife. It's overlooking the river. It's under some massive, beautiful trees. It's outside. There's tables. There's a restaurant there. It's n- nice and thin. When I say nice and thin, it's maybe only about, say, 6 meters deep, but it's very, very long. And it's on the most amazing riverbank. There's people everywhere. It's a beautiful autumn day. And they've got music on the above our heads, um, in the trees. There's speakers and that, and there's music everywhere, and it's really chill. But down below, there is a barge, and so the place is called Arbory. So it's called Arbory because it's under a whole bunch of trees. However, just on on the river where the path is, where the sidewalk is, where people walk along the river, there's a floating version of it. They call it Arbory Afloat,
Hmm.
and they are the same business but different venues, and they've got different music playing on the
Oh
on the
no.
on the float, right, on the barge, and it's pumping over there. Everyone's having a good time, and they've got music on this side, and I'm losing my mind. And Christine says, all of a sudden, she says, "You, these guys, they should just switch the music off from one of these venues because we can't hear both of them correctly." And just as soon as she says it, I've just gone, "Oh my God, that's why I'm losing my mind here. I can't cope. It's too loud." And on my left ear, I'm getting this sound. On my right ear, I'm getting this sound. And the mash of them is just driving me bananas. And I'm just not enjoying myself. And I said to her, about 10 minutes later, our meal hadn't come yet. So we were still waiting to eat. And I said to her, I can't get it. What you said about the music now, I've noticed that I can't get it out of my mind. It's driving me bananas. And we were just sitting there, and she's going, "Oh my God, what sort of a date would this have been if we were meeting on a date? I would have left you here." And I was acting all strange and being weird, and I couldn't sit down. My left side deficits were playing up because it was a little bit warm. Um, I was just, I was just not. I was like fidgeting. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't do anything. And I said to, "Look, I don't know what's going on. Well, I know what's going on, but I'm not coping. I can't deal with all this." Anyhow, we ate, the meal came, we ate. Of course, her meal came first. Mine took another 5 minutes to come. Uh, so I ate after her. And then finally, when we got the meal done, I had to get out of there. We just got up and left. And I realized, and we were walking around the central business district in Melbourne. It was a Saturday afternoon. It was pumping. There was people everywhere. It was a beautiful day. All the cafes were filled. Um, our business district is also very heavily residential. Um, and we had done a fair walk. So I said, so we were going to head towards the car. And I said, well, I don't think I can walk towards the car. I am stuffed. Let's just go and find the closest spot to sit down and have a coffee. And we sat down at this place, which is technically what we'd been doing all day, just walking and sitting in places, having a snack, a coffee, whatever. But I couldn't get back to the car. And I just said to her, let's just go and sit somewhere. We sat down, and I think we just sat there. We had one coffee. We dragged it out for about an hour, as long as we could possibly drag it out. And then I kind of recharged my batteries, and then we walked to the car. And that's me every day. My day has to be strategic. I I've lost that ability to wake up in the morning and just do all my things and not hit those walls that just turn up out of nowhere. And I'm 12 years, you know, 12 years out. So
Yeah.
it's a real interesting thing to observe how my day went yesterday. It was still a lovely day, but my wife doesn't see my disabilities either, my inabilities, my deficits rather. She doesn't see my deficits either. And every once in a while catches her off guard because everything was normal and I'm freaking out because the music is different. And she's going, "Oh my God, you weirdo. Like, what are we going to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We'll get it. It'll be fine. We'll just get through it." So strange, though.
Yeah. So, and I was researching for my book. What I learned is that a lot of cognitive fatigue or neuro fatigue, that was neuro fatigue, what
Mm,
you're having, is related to the brain wanting to run efficiently.
mm.
And so these researchers were they were using MRI imaging. And you know how if you have a brand new car and it's running, it runs really efficiently. And then if you compare it to an older car that wasn't taken care of, it has maybe um, hasn't had an oil and lube in 50,000 miles or something, right?
Yeah.
You, you put the same amount of gas. Well, the newer car is just gonna use up less fuel to get to A to B, whereas the older car, that hasn't been taken care of, uses up more fuel. Well, that's the same thing with the brain. The brain likes to run efficiently. When it has damages, broken connections, cell debris it needs to clean out. If it's spending energy on neuroplasticity, building up those connections, then it has less energy for things like visual filters.
Mm,
Uh, that's why you have the sounds, the light sensitivity, audio filters, because it doesn't have the energy to block that out like you and I were able to do before our brain injuries. Um, and the other thing too is sometimes with a brain injury, the brain loses the ability to differentiate between sounds. So you suffer from sound overload, and it gives dual attention to all sounds. So to the music, to the conversation you're trying to
mm.
hear, to the baby crying across the restaurant, and it's just overwhelming. Whereas before, your brain would be able to go, we want to listen to this conversation. We're going to dampen this background noise.
I
You
love
don't
how
have
you
that
describe
anymore.
that. I love how you describe that. It gives dual attention to both sounds.
Yes. And the way I survive that, because I still have sound sensitivity, is through noise canceling technology.
Yeah.
And they're headphones and earbuds that you can put in to your ear, cancel out that sound, and they're so advanced you can connect them to your smartphone and control the amount of sound coming in via the app, and those have been lifesavers for me. I with that device, I'm able to hear a conversation with a friend better in a loud restaurant or even on an airplane. They assist me hearing conversations because it's cutting back that, the engine noise.
They
Um,
are they small in size, or are they as big as the headphones that you're wearing now?
um, you can get both. You can get both. I do have some smaller ones.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to pull them out, but then they'll activate and get my
Yeah.
headphones off. But you can do the small ones and
Yeah.
just slip those into your ears. You know what else you can do? If you are working in a loud environment and you need to focus, wear the earbuds and the headphones on top, and this will increase the sound control around you and allow you to focus. Say if you're writing a report and you're in an open workspace, or you're a student and you're studying, in a study hall or outside, and some noises are breaking your focus. These are really great tools to save your life. And when you utilize them, you are allowing your brain to save energy to not have to spend on blocking out these external noises. And you're able to use that energy instead to focus on what you need to do or the task that you're working on.
I love what you're saying there. I used to take headphones like the ones that you've got on. I used to take them to work and just put them on without switching music on or anything. It was literally just to keep my head feeling a little less overstimulated. And then recently I discovered there's a brand of earplugs called Loop earplugs. And I'm going to have a
Oh,
link.
yeah.
I'm going to have a link in the show notes. They're just earplugs, but they're able to have 3 different settings and change the level of noise cancelling that they do. And they're designed so that you can go and listen to a concert and have a certain level of cancellation, and you can be in a crowd and you can be in all these places. So for anyone watching and listening, just go to the show notes and see those links. I think they're really cool because they're little, they're inconspicuous. They just look like you've got a normal Apple or whatever brand earpieces in, and that's it. You're good to go. I love it.
Yeah, I have a set myself.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Hey, you wrote a book. What's cool is that you and I, we've got a lot in common. And it's that even though you've got like a head that's a little bit messed up, you're always about solving problems. You're looking for solutions. You're looking for ways to help other people and give people information and tools. And I've got this download on my website. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor After Your Stroke. And it's been around for ages. And it might be a little bit out of date, might need a couple updates. But nonetheless, it has the questions that you can print it off and you can take to your doctor, and you can say, all right, where did the stroke happen? What does that part of the brain do? And so on. And who else can I see? What other doctors do I need to visit, etc. And people contact me and let me know how life changing having those 7 questions, even though they might not all be the correct ones for them, are, because it starts a conversation that they never had the ability to start before. And then that usually sets them down the trajectory of knowing to ask certain people certain questions. And you've got a similar download on your website. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I do want to talk about the book After the Crash. Tell me a little bit about it. How did you get to the point of deciding that you should write a book about this situation, and what is the book meant to accomplish?
So I didn't come up with the idea on my own. Another great friend recommended that I write the book. And so I just put it on the little to-do list. And then at my 5-year anniversary from my car crash, I decided to start writing the book. And the reason why I wanted to write the book was my goal was to get back to work as soon as I can, because I was the single income earner from my family and I earned the healthcare benefits and so forth. And so I needed to get back to work, and I wanted to get back to work. And I remember the first couple of weeks, like before I was supposed to go back to work, freaking out. Like, I don't know what I need to make my return to work successful. I don't know how I'm going to handle this. I don't know how this is going to go. And I had some really, really great books on how to recover from a brain injury that I learned from, but they weren't niched down to returning to work, what you need to return to work. So that was my goal. I wanted to fill that niche. My book would focus on supporting you returning to work or studying while your brain healed. And so it talks about brain injury symptoms and common brain injury symptoms and the specialists who can help you with it. Because I also didn't want to say, yeah, you can have dizziness after a brain injury, but not say what to do next. Some books don't say what to do next. And I
Mm.
really wanted to answer that question. And so I do have those answered in my book. And then I share all the strategies and compensatory tools that I had learned to support my successful return to work. And that's the main part of the book. And then at the end of the book, I have um, 5 strategies to get back to life and to support your brain's healing. And it talks about mindfulness, nutrition, sleep, exercise, about here in America, the American Disability Act, how to, we have Family Medical Leave Act that helps protect your job when you take time off work to heal from an injury or a serious illness. And I also have ways to ask for accommodations for your disability from your employer in there. And then I talk about finances, which is really important. If your finances aren't healthy, then you're not going to feel healthy, or you're going to have a harder time getting better if you're stressed out about paying the bills. And then I talk about at the end about letting go of the old, the things that you were in the past before your injury, and how to embrace the new you and your new brain.
That sounds amazing. Definitely thought of things that a lot of other books haven't thought of. And I think that's going to be really helpful for people to be able to access a book that has some information, again, to start thinking about solving problems that seem unsolvable, um, especially when your brain is not working properly and you're trying to get through to the next stage. There's a, this would be a great book for caregivers as well, family members, loved ones, partners, all sorts of people will be able to benefit from that, because then if, like you and I, if our um, partners are taking up the slack, then they might benefit from knowing which direction to head, and that might make it easier for everybody, including the family. So that's really cool. How long did it take you to write?
It took me, oh, I started in 2020 and it was published in at the beginning of 2023. Um, I started, so I'd say about 2.5 years to 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 get it written. And I wrote it along with a self-publishing company so they had writing coaches. And so, which is really great because I'm a nurse practitioner. I don't know how to write. I didn't know anything about marketing or uh, social media accounts, those kinds of things. And so they really helped me out with that. And I think
I
that really helped with my brain healing too, with all that additional learning.
Yeah, yeah, it does help for sure. I wrote my book. It took 4 years from concept to research to writing. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I mean, I don't my ability to like process words and all that kind of stuff fatigues me. The usual stuff, I've got to find ways to get through that while I'm in the zone, in the writing zone, but then I get fatigued. It was a real
Yeah,
challenge. And I had a book coach as well because there was no way I was going to be able to do this on my own. Nobody would have said to me, "How's the book coming along?" I would have said, "It's not. Forget about it. I'm not doing it anymore." um,
yeah,
I'm so glad I did it though. Your book has a few things that my book has in it. So it's three of those topics: nutrition, sleep, exercise are in my book as well. And what's cool is I wrote the book because the chapters were not chapters that I thought of. I've interviewed 10 stroke survivors. They've told me that stroke was the best thing that happened to them. And without prying out, without leading them down the path to tell them why I said that, I got out of them these 10 chapters. And then when I interviewed the next person, they tended to the same 10 things. The next person, the same 10 things. And what they seem to be universal things that we all need to attend to start the healing journey and to sort of give it legs, so to speak, so that you start to improve things marginally on all these areas, and then they all add up, and then there's a massive difference in improving. And I had this little bit of a aha moment. It was like, wow, okay, that's what everyone needs to know about. The only problem is everyone else's book says exactly the same thing. Everyone has to go back and attend to all these things. And I thought, oh my God, I've just written another bloody book that everyone else has written. It's the same book. For God's sake, what's the point of that? But what is cool is that it's not the same book. It's a completely different book like yours. Your spin on nutrition, your spin on sleep, your spin on exercise will be completely different to mine, but they all attend to healing the brain. They all attend to making the brain stronger and better. And that's what's really cool about it is that it doesn't matter where we come from, those, we'll call them 10 things that need to be attended to are universal. And getting different people's perspectives on how to go about healing your brain, um, even though they have the same title, for example, at the beginning of the chapter, is really important to get a lot of different versions of how to sleep better, a lot of different versions of how to eat better, so that you can find the one that works for you and you can get the result that
exactly.
you need, right? And
Yeah.
I couldn't get that result from reading somebody else's book, for example, but I might get that result from you. And just picking up one thing out of a book that you
Hmm.
didn't know could be the game changer. It could be the one thing that then propels the recovery in the right direction. Um, Now that it's out, what's the feedback been like? How do people respond to your book?
Very well. I've gotten several 5-star reviews, and I've had some people really invest a lot of time into their reviews, and their reviews tell me that my book has reached the goal of my intention. That it's they talk about how it's a companion, um, because it understands what they're going through. And they talk about some of the things that I had put in my tools and strategies they hadn't realized or thought about, and now are going to use or wish they had known back
Mm.
when they were dealing with whatever the issue was. they say that it's easy to read, and that was my goal. I didn't want to talk a whole lot about my story, even though sharing your story is really important. I wanted to get to the point. You need to do, if you have this, do this and this. If you have, I didn't want to waste anybody's energy, their brain energy, reading too much of a fluffy story, because I know reading time is limited when you have a brain injury. And that's why my book is also on Audible. I read it for Audible, because I know how difficult it is to read. In fact, I'm a big Audible user myself, and learned that I was able to learn information from listening to books. Whereas before my brain injury, I was very much the person that had to read it. I was not an auditory learner.
Yeah.
But after my head injury, I became an auditory learner. And so that was important to me too, is to have both versions of the book available, because yeah, in the beginning, that was one of the things I did notice was my ability to read hours on end was diminished down to 5 minutes, 5, 10 minutes early in my recovery.
I always struggled to read hours on end. I think I had some kind of a, you know, uh, I had a dislike of reading, not because I didn't enjoy learning from reading, but because books used to put me to sleep, like literally. And I struggled at school. I struggled ever. I never read a book. I think my first book I read was in my 20s. And when we had a book to read for English class, I would make sure the book had a movie attached to it. And
Mm.
um, we read, we were supposed to read the book, The Killing Fields, when I was in school. And it was a book about the Holocaust that happened in Cambodia during the 70s Khmer Rouge regime, right? And I was like, oh my God, I'm not reading this book. There's no chance. And there happened to be a movie that came out, and I read and watched the movie. And then I wrote my paper based on the movie, and I got really high marks, and my friends were all annoyed and upset. And I'm like, guys, like it's the same thing. Like one's the movie, it's telling the story. I've interpreted it. I've said, like, well, get over it. You guys read the book and took ages. I don't know how long it took you to read the book. I saw the movie in 2 hours, and that was it. I was done. And I knew from back then that I had a different way of grasping information and learning. But of course, back then there wasn't a lot of stuff available on Audible. There wasn't an Audible. You had to buy cassette tapes and
Mm.
CDs and all that type of stuff. And I remember the first massive amount of listening that I did. Somebody told me to listen to the Tony Robbins cassette series. Tony Robbins has about 7 billion tapes that he made available in one of his programs, I think Unleash the Power Within. And man, I was able to put that in the car while I was driving to work and then just listen to that and then flip the tape over and then go on and keep listening to that. And I got through his 30 or 40 cassette tapes quicker than I ever would have got through, say, 30 chapters of a book or 30 volumes of a book or something like that. And it was a game changer because information was now able to enter my mind the way that it served me. And I didn't know that I had this other method of learning. So for people who are listening, who want to read and can't read a book, and perhaps might want to try listening, one of the things that I do now is I actually buy the book and the Audible, and I read while the person is narrating the book. And
Oh,
that's
wow.
an even better experience because I don't have to get tired doing any of it. I'm reading my eyes are just scanning the words so I know where I'm up to. And if I need to highlight something in my highlighter, and then I'm listening to the person tell the story, and it's just two ways of joining the dots and embedding that information. Completely different experience to just reading or just listening. It's amazing.
That is an amazing combo. I would never think to put
Yeah,
those two together. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to steal that from you and
give it a
share it.
try. Yeah, give it a try. Give it a try, Kelly, because it's just so gentle and easy to do. And you don't have to do the thinking because the eyes and the ears are connecting the dots, and it's just embedding it far better. Um, so how thick is the book? Do you have a copy there? Can you hold it up to the
Oh yeah.
camera? How
Oh.
many pages is it?
It's not that many. I think it's a little over 200.
Yeah, perfect. Stroke survivors love
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah, brilliant.
And
Yeah, that's all right.
I don't know if I
You've
can.
got the filter on. I'll make sure there you go. I'll make sure there's a copy of that on the show notes as well.
But it's really, yeah, it's really easy to read. The other thing too is on the end of each chapter, I have like a list of recaps. So if
Mm,
you forget or you just want to quickly look back on something, you can go to that list and it'll remind you. And yeah, write in it, highlight it.
mm,
Um, yeah, you don't have to read it front to back.
mm.
You can pick the chapter like I think I have sound sensitivity. Just go straight to that and get and learn about that.
Yeah, excellent. You know, with my stroke survivor guests, I ask them these three questions at the end of the podcast episode. So now I'm going to ask you, but it's really relevant. So, what's the hardest thing about traumatic brain injury for you?
For me, it's the fatigue. Yeah, the chronic fatigue. You going to sleep, and no matter how much sleep you get, you wake up. You don't wake up refreshed. I remember waking up refreshed and bouncing out of bed. I don't do that anymore. I haven't since the car accident, and here I am 8 years later and still don't do that. So that is the hard part. Um, is the is living with the fatigue.
Mm. What has TBI taught you?
Oh wow, it has taught me to have patience, and it has made me, I think, even more empathetic and compassionate and understanding of others around me. And it has made me more grounded in the present moment. And I spend a lot less time in the past and the future now.
Mm. Has it made you a better nurse?
I'm sorry?
Has it made you a better nurse?
Well, before my head injury, I was a cardiology nurse practitioner. I help people with their hearts. And after my head injury, after 2 years, of learning about the brain, I was able to beg and plead myself into a training position as a neurology nurse practitioner. And I do feel it has made me a better provider because I've been there and done that, have the t-shirt. I am able to hear what my patients are saying and put words to what they're not getting out, and they're like, oh yeah, that's what I meant, it's good. And so I'm able to take these vague kind of general struggles and say, oh, well, you're having difficulty with hearings because you're experiencing hearing overload. And then I explain it and they're like, yes, that's it. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm a better ambassador between the patient and the care they need.
Yeah, you're a translator as well. You're able to decipher what they mean and
Yes,
put it into words.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I love that. I hate that you had to go through what you had to go through to get there, but I love that you can do that. Yeah. Um, there's other people that are listening that have all had a traumatic brain injury, all my guests. Um, and there'll be someone in the very early stage of their recovery, and they get to hear from me and you who are you're 8 years out, I'm 12 years out, and they're kind of like, oh my God, like, will I ever be like that? What would you like to tell people who are just starting their journey or even are a few years in? Uh, what kind of advice, information, encouragement would you like to offer?
That there is hope that you will get better. Um, the thing is that every brain injury is as different as our personalities. And every road to recovery, therefore, is going to be different. And some of those roads are going to be shorter, and some of them are going to be a long highway. And you just don't know until you get there. What you need to do is just be in the moment that you're at and do the best you can to support your brain healing. You will have to learn over time how to push yourself to help your brain grow stronger, but not push it so hard that you end up what I call regressing in your recovery. And that's when you all your past symptoms are unmasked, and you're exhausted, and you're in bed for days trying to recoup and get your energy back. So it's a lot of push and pull. The recovery isn't a linear line. It's going to be like a dance.
It sure is. Hey, Kelly, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our discussion.
Well, thanks again for joining us on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kelly Tuttle. To get a copy of my book about stroke recovery, go to recoveryafterstroke.com/book. To learn more about my guests, including links to their social media, and to download a transcript of the entire interview, please go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes. Thank you to all those people who have already left a review about the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. It really means the world to me, and it makes a massive difference to how people who are looking for this type of content can find it. If you haven't left a review and you would like to leave one, you can do that by going to your Spotify or your iTunes app and going in, leaving a 5-star review and a few words about what the show means to you. If you're watching on YouTube, comment below the video. Now, this is starting to take off. People are commenting and we're creating conversations on the different YouTube videos. So it's great to see. I love people who are interacting with my video, and I also respond to all the messages. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, like the episode. And if you want to get notifications of future episodes, obviously subscribe to the show, hit the notifications bell. If you are a stroke survivor with a story to share about your experience, come and join me on the show. The interviews are not scripted. You do not have to plan for them. All you need to do is be a stroke survivor who wants to share their story in the hope that it will help somebody else who's going through something similar to you. If you have a commercial product that you would like to promote that is related to supporting stroke survivors, come and join me on a sponsored episode of the show. Just go to recoveryafterstroke.com/contact, fill out the form briefly explaining which category you belong to, and I will respond with more details about how we can connect via Zoom. Thank you once again for being here and listening. I really appreciate you. See you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy quality, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.